Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is Debra, and you are listening to or watching Human Potential at Work. I am the CEO of Rue Global Impact, and we work with corporations all over the world and governments and UN agencies, supporting them strategically to include people with disabilities. But we also really like to, on this show, to put a spotlight on where change is really happening. So my guest today, his name is Jeff Wissel, and he's with Fidelity. And I had the pleasure to meet him at a conference. It was outside CSUN, and to learn a little bit more about his work. And the more I learned, the more I thought, I think I should help spread the word about the really good work he's doing. So Jeff, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Debra. It's wonderful to be here. I really appreciate this opportunity. And it was great meeting you at CSUN.
Yes. T-Base. It was the T-Base dinner that we met at, but they're great people too. So Jeff, tell us about, first of all, a little bit about who you are and why do you care about this field? Because most people don't go to school for it and then become accessibility or disability inclusion experts. And so what took you to this path to where you're in this position of making sure that Fidelity is accessible?
Absolutely. So I'm 51 years old. I've been at Fidelity Investments. I'm in my 25th year. I spent the first 20 years as a certified financial planner. I assisted our clients on the phones with their financial planning. Absolutely loved it. But I also have a degenerative eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa, or RP. And so it's something that I've had all of my life. I'm still sighted, but legally blind. I've been using a cane now for about 2 years. And the reason I am so involved with accessibility now at Fidelity, it's been an amazing chain of events. So about 4 years ago, I guess I should also say, for that first 20 years, I hid my vision loss. I did not know anyone else that was blind or low vision, and I felt vulnerable. So it's an invisible disability, and human nature, I hid my vision loss. I would use assistive technology on my computer, so I was able to interact with our systems and so forth. But this amazing chain of events, I met a colleague in one of our other phone centers, Alicia. She was a vice president. Alicia, about 20 some odd years ago, had gone blind because of, or due to diabetic retinopathy. We were introduced, and we built this friendship. She's been my mentor. To this day, we talk every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. She helped me find my inner voice. I don't know if anyone in your listeners will register with this, but when you find your inner voice and the light bulb goes off and you become comfortable with your disability, what I perceived was my greatest weakness has actually turned out to be one of my greatest strengths. And Alicia we found this connection. We would tell others about it at Fidelity, and every single time we would share that with someone, they would say, I have MS or CP, right, or my daughter has this or that. We had this connection with folks where they did not feel vulnerable and they wanted to share. So Alicia told me, she's like, you ought to consider starting an employee resource group for associates with disabilities. Farthest thing from my radar, I went from hiding my vision loss for 20 years to now thinking about this idea. So Fidelity has 11 regional phone centers, and they're all around the country. Smallest one, we have 1,000 associates. The largest one, over 6,000 associates. It was over 5 years since a employee resource group had started here at Fidelity. We had 5 of them previously. So we started in my phone center in Covington, Kentucky. I have an amazing manager and a vice president of sales at the time. And we went through the process of starting this as a pilot for 6 months, this employee resource group. We call it Fidelity Enable. At the end of that 6 months, we gained approval to go to our other 10 regional investor centers. What was really amazing about this is we would promote the pilot program in our internal newsletter, and associates from across the company would respond and they'd say, when this comes to our Albuquerque phone center or Boston, I want to help lead because I have a disability. And this is amazing that we're doing this. So we had this kind of built-in leadership team then that we were able to quickly launch. So in January of 2016, Enable went live to the other 10 regions. And it's been over, just a little over 2.5 years now. We have over 3,247 active members of our employee resource group. That's over 7% of our workforce. And
Wow.
Deborah, I think
Wow.
one of the greatest things is when you see other associates finding their inner voice and at all places at their employer, it's just awesome on steroids. It is such an amazing event.
It is an incredible story. It's an incredible story because I'm telling you, I'm starting to lose faith in the corporations. I feel like many of them are only doing this. And I've worked in corporate America for 25 years, but I've always been such a champion of corporations, but I'm starting to feel like too many check the boxes. And, there was 180 amazing corporations, for example, at the Disability IN conference. 180, yay, that's wonderful. Look at these leaders. But where is everybody else? 180, that's nothing. We have thousands and thousands of corporations in the US. And so I know that, sometimes you can't boil the ocean. You have to do what you're doing. But, one thing though, Jeff, now we know because you came on the show, and I'm going to definitely make sure everybody knows about this. But so first of all, I would think, how did y'all know to do this? And you explained that a little bit. You didn't. You figured it out as you went. Number two, do you think there are other Fidelities, other companies like Fidelities out there that are having these amazing chain reactions, and we don't even know about them as a community, so we don't know how to support the corporation? So I'm asking you some really big questions that, by the way, you didn't give me permission to ask you before. But I mean, I'm fascinated with what you're achieving. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. It's just great to be part of something like this, and I think I can share something that will build your faith and restore your faith in corporations. When we first launched as a pilot, I participated in several events I live in Cincinnati. It's right across the river from Covington, Kentucky, where our phone center is. So our Cincinnati Chamber of Commerce hosts some really amazing events around disability and inclusion and starting employee resource groups. So companies like Procter & Gamble, Fifth Third Bank, U.S. Bank, they're headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio. We had this amazing opportunity to partner and to be mentored by my friend Mike from P&G and Mitch from Fifth Third Bank. Keep in mind, I went from being an individual phone representative, loving what I was doing, but leading this initiative at a massive company like Fidelity. They took our group under their wing. They shared what they had learned at their companies, their challenges, their successes, and so forth, and helped us. Other companies did the same. Now that we are a little bit mature in our process, we get to help pay that forward. Some of my best professional friends are from companies that traditionally would be our competitors. We compete for clients, right? And with other banks, with other investment firms and so forth. At Disability In, we have a financial roundtable. There are about 17 companies that we all get together and we talk about products and services that we're all using, diversity and inclusion, our employee resource groups for associates with disabilities, figuring out what can we do to reduce the unemployment rate for qualified individuals with disabilities and so forth. It's this, we all abide by each other's non-disclosure agreements because, we have to.
Right.
There's so much that we can and that we do share. I love Jenny Leigh Fleury from Microsoft, her phrase, her and Megan Lawrence, when one of us wins in this space, we all win. And we've learned a lot from other companies.
Yeah, I'm blessed to have Jenny on the program. Gosh, it's been a few years ago. We've been doing this show for about 4 years, but that's something that I've always loved about our community and industry is that we never really worried. We would call them friendly competitors because we learn from each other and we all win and society wins when people with disabilities really are really included more meaningfully. And the thing that I loved about the story that you're doing at Fidelity is, well, in the first place, I hadn't heard about it. And so it makes me wonder, I know some companies don't like to brag about themselves. Some companies say, well, that's not why we're doing it. Some companies are actually afraid to put them on, the radar of, because every company I meet they're always saying, we haven't done enough. We're working on it, but we haven't done enough. So it's an interesting time to be alive. That's for sure. But I think it's exciting to see progress like this being made. And even if, slowly but surely, it sounds like it is getting out. The message is getting out, but this is a really powerful story.
It's what's really been fascinating as well, I think. So with our employee resource group, it literally was one cup of coffee at a time. We would set up a table in our lobbies of our phone centers, and we would just have a table with some balloons and a flyer and a poster. And we would just say, hi, I'm Jeff or Perrine, I'm with Fidelity Enable, our employee resource group. Brandon, would you like to learn more? And it was just amazing. Out of each one of these, we would build the membership, and associates with disabilities, whether it's a direct disability themselves or an indirect disability by, their spouse, their partner, their children, everybody knows someone. And I heard someone say this, everyone loves someone that has a disability. We all want to share. No one wants to feel vulnerable. And one of the most amazing things I found throughout this whole journey, the human brain does not like gaps of information. When we have a disability, it's oftentimes where that unknown, what does our future hold? How am I going to attend the meeting if I am blind, low vision, and I can't read my own PowerPoint slides? How am I going to get to work if I have a seizure and I can no longer draw? All these questions that we don't know the answers to, fear and anxiety fill in those gaps of information. So 2 benefits of our employee resource group. One is to find out that you're not the only one. It's the beginning. And it's just an amazing feeling. There's strength in numbers. The second most wonderful thing that happens, that fear and anxiety gets replaced by best practices and by real life experience of how your associates and colleagues are living with the disability, but not only living with the disability, finding out innovative ways to succeed and to be successful. And when that mental energy that we all waste worrying about how we're going to do things that we don't know, and we now all of a sudden are able to channel that energy, it becomes true productivity. And Debra, one of the most awesome things that we see happening, associates not only are bringing their authentic selves to work, that's a wonderful thing. They're bringing a diversity of thought to the table. Think about it. If you're deaf, hard of hearing, and you're sitting in a meeting and your team, is talking about a project or a service, if they're not thinking about someone who's deaf, hard of hearing, how would they interact with that? They're missing out on that. So when they can bring that perspective to the table, it makes it inclusive. Everyone participates. When we find our authentic selves, our inner voice, we bring our diversity of thought to the table. That's what has been so inspiring throughout this whole process for us.
Wow, that is really beautifully said, Jeff. Beautifully said, and it's, I talk about that a lot in the books that I've written on these topics. And the reality is, one really cool. There are so many wonderful, cool things about employing people, and people have disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Is the innovation you see, and the creativeness, and the loyalty, and the passion, and the. I remember years ago hearing a story from Canon, and Canon had created this little program where they had taught people with disabilities, intellectual disabilities, like my daughter with Down syndrome. They taught them to take the cameras apart and put the different pieces, which parts are thrown away, which can be recycled, which can be reused, all of that, because they're very conscious about the environment as well. And so it was a big success. The first year they made like 16 or 19 million dollars from just saving pieces that could be used and all that. So yay, big success. But they did a regular annual survey, and they did a survey that year. And in that particular plant in outside Chicago, um, they noticed that everybody's productivity across the plant went up by like 36%. And they researched that because, of course, a brand would want to know, why did your employees' productivity go up by 36% across the board, only there? And what they found was everybody was so proud to work for Canon that would do something that's good for the environment, good for people, that they got to have lunch with John, who has Down syndrome, that was paid, and he got the same benefits as they did. And, when we're proud, we are more productive.
Absolutely. I think with us here at Fidelity, something that also has happened through our Enable Employee Resource Group along those kind of similar lines. I mentioned finding, your inner voice and so forth.
Yes.
Through Enable, we learned so much about the disability dimension of our associate base. We would do panel discussions. We would have a disability etiquettes workshop. So we would have a disability etiquette kind of training / interactive dialogue for about 20 minutes. And then we have 3 Enable members who, for almost every case, it was the first time that they shared their personal disability experience, and of all places, their employer. Each time we would do these panel discussions, other associates in the room, I'll just cite one. The panelists all were born with a disability, whether it be CP or MS, and they were sharing their experiences. One of our colleagues stood up after, during the Q&A part, question and answer part, and said, "You've given me hope. I am coming from the other age spectrum. I'm aging into my disability. You've given me hope."
Right.
I mean, we get choked up with this. But what's happened with all of those learnings, we also looked at what are our clients sharing with us? What impact does a disability have on our client base? We took all of this information, and my colleague Hale, my co-lead, we had the opportunity to build a business case. We presented it to 20 of our senior most leaders, and we are now, I'm honored and happy to say, 15 months into, we have a Office of Customer Accessibility here at Fidelity.
Wow.
So we've had a digital accessibility team for almost going on 11 years now, and their focus has always been digital and mobile. Now, with our Office of Customer Accessibility, we have enterprise-wide focus. So our branches, our phone centers, our digital and mobile platforms, as well as distributions, and our simple mission, which gets complicated very quickly, but our simple mission is to do everything that we can to optimize interactions with our customers and to ensure that internally accessibility becomes a design principle in everything that we do here at Fidelity.
Wow.
So it's been an amazing journey.
And it all started from people just owning who they are, because you were already employees of Fidelity, and you just started really owning who you are as an individual, which is hard to do. So, I know that I hid my disabilities for years, and they were for different reasons. At first, because I didn't want to look, weak or broken. Second, stupid things like I have a daughter with a disability, so they think my whole family's broken, and now my husband has a disability too. So it just makes us a normal part of the human family. But
Yep.
but then it became, well, I'm in the disability inclusion field, and can I compare ADHD and depression, sometimes severe depression, with somebody that has lost their sight, or is it one, and I start wrapping my sometimes head around that, which I think that is something that our whole community is doing right now. One thing that I really want to do, I've written a few articles about it that I'm going to publish. I really want our community to come together and own who we are, not as a broken community, but as somebody that, billions of somebodies that really can add value and are adding value. And I think that's why the work you're doing is so important, and that you're looking at it from the digital accessibility and the physical accessibility, which we often see forgotten. We handled that maybe when the building was built, but after that, we see a lot of issues with built barriers in the workforce.
I'll share another quick story if I may. So again, an example of two associates who found their inner voice. Our colleagues Perrine and Blair. Perrine and Blair both have been with Fidelity for quite some time, and they are deaf, hard of hearing. They actually talked about this and talked with their friend group, and there was not a sign for Fidelity Investments in the deaf community. So Perrine and Blair developed their own sign for Fidelity Investments. And our video internally, they made a video of it and it went viral. Well, what's really cool about this is they found their inner voice, and we had a pilot program, an autism internship program, again, through our Enable group and our amazing executive sponsor and my colleague Hale. They started a one-person intern the first time. That was successful, and it grew to the next time 6 candidates, 6 interns with various disabilities on the autism spectrum. Well, Perrine, who did the video of the Fidelity Sign language, actually is now the director of our program called Fidelity Belong. And this current semester, there are 17 interns at Fidelity who have various disabilities. And Perrine is unstoppable. We're looking forward to see what happens this next time in the fall and then in 2020. We don't have this all figured out with accessibility, disability inclusion, and so forth. We hear it so many times that it's a journey, and I equate it to a marathon. We're sprinting into this marathon, but to circle back to your thought earlier, Debra, what we have found is internally the conversation, we just hadn't had the conversation. Once the conversation is brought up, our senior leadership, for our Office of Customer Accessibility, we have 17 of our senior most leaders as our steering committee. We report out to them on a quarterly basis. And they provide feedback, and they provide the circle of influence that is needed in each of their divisions to help us ensure that accessibility does become a design principle in everything that we do. It's just having that conversation. And when we attend Disability:*in, the Disability Equality Index survey, for instance, we actually used that survey 4 years ago as kind of our roadmap to look at what are successful companies in this space doing to become more inclusive. That survey helped us to raise the level of conversation at the senior most level around some areas like procurement, legal, digital space, physical space. And once the conversation was initiated, our job has been incredibly easy because our senior leadership has been so passionate about this. It's becoming part of our DNA. And we had the opportunity too to partner, as I mentioned, JP Morgan, Fifth Third, P&G, the leaders of Walgreens and so forth. All of the leaders in the space are willing to share. and
Yep.
it's making a difference. It's making a difference.
So, Jeff, how are y'all telling your story? I mean, I haven't heard very much about the Fidelity story. And so, how are you getting it out? It sounds like there's all kind of ways you're doing it internally, but how are you letting your customers know? And I know that Fidelity sees this, and I see this as a positive, that this is a positive business opportunity. It's, people are expecting to deal with corporate brands that are making a difference. And these stories, these are definitely making a difference. So I would think the young people would be loving these stories.
It's kind of a two-part answer, I would say. Again, learning from our friends at Microsoft, Jenny had shared the Microsoft's journey with us several times for different internal meetings. And the one thing that we really took away was, let's make sure we get our own house in order first. Let's make sure we look at our programs, our properties, our culture, our behaviors, and make sure that we are having the conversation. That's step one. Step two is, I think, looking for the quick wins, because human nature, everyone likes success, right? And if we can do some simple things around the conversation and implement some change, it builds momentum. When we find associates who have a circle of influence in their role, and they have a direct connection and that passion, whether it be through themselves or their spouse or children or friends, they're able to move the needle. So we have a lot of associates who are moving the needle in their spaces, in addition to senior leadership on down and so forth. That's where our momentum is right now. It's our second year for participating in the Disability Equality Index through Disability: In. We're very fortunate and thrilled that we've been able to score 100% for the 2 years. That does not mean we're able to stop. That just means, we're having the conversation, we're learning, and there's so much more to do. If I can share one other story really quick, in one of our divisions, the president of the division, Kevin, is just fully embraces accessibility, disability inclusion, and just diversity. In that division, we had for a day and a half over 650 associates who have control on one of our external websites that 30 million clients use to plan their retirement. Those 650 associates, for 3 hours on the first day, learned about what is accessibility, why is it important, what are the benefits of us doing this, what are the risks of us not doing this, who does this benefit, and so forth. That was like the momentum, the motivational side of it. For an hour and a half of that time, it was, let's teach them how to fish. Let's teach them how to actually code for accessibility, what to recognize, and so forth. The entire next day, all of those associates spent the whole day on the pages that they own on that website, just some of the pages, because there's 40,000 pages. You can't boil the ocean. But 8 hours in that day, they audited their pages. They did the remediation, the QA testing. They got it ready for production. And what we found from that, we found a lot of critical and high-level accessibility errors, which we knew would be there. And they've learned how to fix those. They have a new definition of done. So moving forward, that code will not be released if there are critical or high-level accessibility errors. But we found we had a lot of subject matter experts that we didn't know about. And folks love it because they know this makes a difference for folks. And everyone wants to feel like they're making a difference. So even with coding and so forth, we found passionate leaders in this space. So it just keeps going.
And I'll tell you, Jeff, I see that all the time when we do training, when we do technical training and different training with corporations, especially when I'm with the IT people, they know this already. So I remember training this huge telecom company, and I trained 600 of their programmers, and most of them knew as much or maybe even more than I did about, because I'm not a coder anymore. I used to be, but not anymore. And I was like, but if y'all know this, why have you not been doing it? And they said, because we're actually afraid to. I mean, and I understand that too, because the reality is you have these tasks to do, and I really expect you to do it in this amount of time. I mean, you know, it works that way. And then you're going to stop everything and single-handedly, you're going to, create accessibility. Well, it doesn't work that way. So they had to wait until they had senior manager approval, and then they ran with it. It was very exciting to see.
I'm smiling because it's funny you said that. So, when a company like Fidelity is going through the agile, the business model agile, and this happened to be on a Tuesday, which we're using as a learning day, so that was fine. But that Wednesday, when that whole day where the developers and designers and so forth were doing this, that's usually when they would set up the work for the next 2 weeks, and we would get emails from the invite we sent. Well, sorry, we can't participate because we have to. Well, the president, Kevin, and the domain leaders sent out emails, and they had to, let all of their associates know, no, this is what we're doing today. And so even though you can share it one time, we're all so in tune to what you said. We have priorities. There's competing business needs. When you have your senior leadership saying, no,
Yes.
today it's accessibility. I'm honored to work for a company like Fidelity that embraces this. And again, we're on the journey. We're learning so much from others. And how are we getting the word out? Back to your question, wonderful people like yourself and your show and being able to share this. But we're learning on the backs of a lot of our friends at other companies and yourself and folks who are kind of leading the way in this. And we're finding we're starting to be able to be a thought leader in this in some areas too. But
I agree.
It doesn't matter where you start, just start.
I agree. And I do want to just mention the valuable 500. I can't remember if I sent you an email about it, but that's one thing I like about the valuable 500. It doesn't ever replace something like the Disability N or other programs that we have in the US, but it's the CEOs speaking to the CEOs. It's CEO to CEO. And there's about 330 corporations all over the world that are in the process of becoming a valuable member. Luckily, there's no cost to do it. You just have to be a corporation. You have to have at least 1,000 employees. And the third one is the CEO is the one that has to sign the letter saying, yes, we already are committing to this. But it's such a good point with that you brought up, in that when the senior manager, it takes all of us. It takes the senior managers. It takes people coming out and embracing who they are. It takes people getting behind it. It takes what you're doing it. And you mentioned this is now part of Fidelity Investments DNA. Well, I'm one of your customers. I didn't know that. So I'm very proud to be a Fidelity customer. I have an account, which is my husband. But I didn't know that as your customer, which is why, yay, that a lot of people that watch the show or listen to the show will get that information. But Jeff, tell us how we can find out more about your programs. I mean, are you on social media? How can we follow your work? You're a very impressive speaker. I'm very impressed. So how can we find out more about you and about, what you are doing over there at Fidelity Investments? And kudos, applause for the work.
Thank you very much, Debra. I am on LinkedIn as well, fidelity.com. In the global little footer section on the bottom right, there's a link that says accessibility. That brings up a lot of information about what we're doing here at Fidelity from an accessibility standpoint, whether it be through our branch system, our phones, our digital platforms, and so forth. And we're just in the process of updating our About Us, which will have a lot of great information about our 6 employee resource groups, diversity and inclusion, and so forth. But always, thank you for being you and your husband for being customers. Very, very, very happy. We never take that business for granted. And, the one thing that we always have to think about is when we're designing our web pages, our phone channels, it's really making sure that we're looking at this from a diversity of thought especially with aging demographics.
Mhm.
And a lot of us are aging into disabilities and so forth. So just always earning that business. And again, I am just so thankful for this opportunity to share a little bit about the work that we're doing. And thank you for what you do. You have an amazing
Yeah.
an amazing podcast in your books.
Thank you. Thank you. And my husband, unfortunately, is one of those that is aging into a disability. He has early onset dementia, which is a hard diagnosis. And so I've had to help him more with this Fidelity account, but we've noticed it's been very accessible to him because his needs have changed, as you're saying. So applause for everything you are doing. I know that we're going to stay in touch. I look forward to you sharing articles and things about what you're doing that I can share with the audience. So let's definitely do that. And we'll keep talking. But thank you for your leadership. We really, really are grateful for it. And we appreciate Fidelity Investments and all they're doing. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Debra. This has been an honor. We're very grateful for this opportunity.
Yeah, this is fun. We're changing the world. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks, everybody.